On Agriculture, Rural Development, Food and Drug-related agencies will come to order. Let me say welcome to Chairwoman DeLaura, Ranking Member Granger, Ranking Member Fortenberry, subcommittee members who are here in person, and those participating by secure video teleconference, including Ms. Wasserman Schultz, and I expect shortly Ms. Ming. Before I move to my opening statement, I'd like to offer a brief explanation of how this markup will work. Today's room has been configured to maintain the recommended 6-foot social distancing between members, staff, and the press corps in the room. As I mentioned, some members have opted to use secure video teleconferencing, which will allow them to participate remotely. For those on video conference, once you start speaking, there will be a slight delay before you're displayed on the main screen. Speaking into the microphone activates the camera, displaying the speaker on the main screen. Do not stop your remarks if you do not immediately see the screen switch. If the screen does not change after several seconds, please make sure that you are not muted. To minimize background noise and ensure the correct speaker is being displayed, we'd like to ask that members who are participating by video remain muted unless you have sought recognition. In terms of the speaking order, we will follow our traditional order, beginning with the chair and ranking member of the subcommittee, then the chair and ranking member of the full committee, and then any other members who may wish to speak. Finally, we've set up an email address to which members can send anything they wish to submit in writing at any of our hearings or markups, including documents to be inserted in the record by unanimous consent, amendments, motions, other unanimous consent requests, and so on. That email address has been provided to your staffs. I would remind all members that they must verbally request unanimous consent out loud, as well as sending the document or written unanimous consent request to the email address. Before us today is the Chairman's mark for the fiscal year 2022 Agriculture, Rural Development, Food and Drug Administration, and related agencies appropriations bill. The bill and accompanying report are the products of a lot of hard work. And this year, for the first time in over a decade, we included community project funding. Let me take a moment to express my gratitude to the ranking member of the subcommittee, Mr. Fortenberry. Over the past 3 years, we've developed a very close working relationship. I appreciate his outside-the-box thinking to grow the agriculture family and to create livable ecosystems of sustainability and to ensure that our USDA programs are working for everyone. Again, in large part, due to our close collaboration and the collaboration of our staffs, we have developed what I believe is a great bill that will help millions of Americans each and every day. This year, our subcommittee held 8 hearings, including one with Secretary Vilsack. Our fiscal year 2022 allocation is $26.55 billion, compared to the fiscal year 21 enacted level of $23.699 billion. This bill addresses 3 overarching priorities. First, by our estimate, the bill provides nearly $400 million in investments solely to ensure equitable participation in USDA programs, more than 16% higher than the administration's impressive request. Among those investments are increases at our 1890 and 1994 land-grant universities and Hispanic-serving institutions. It also provides funding to improve program access to historically underserved communities and provides a healthy increase by USDA's Office of Civil Rights above the budget request. Secondly, it provides nearly $350 million to address the impacts of climate change and the challenges of ecosystem sustainability. Third, it fully funds federal pay costs and rebuilds the leadership offices at USDA that have been decimated over the past several years. These changes will ensure that program levels are not reduced by having to absorb pay costs and that they are properly managed. Supporting our rural communities remains a top priority. In total, the bill provides more than $4.43 billion in budget authority for rural development programs to fund critical infrastructure such as water and wastewater systems and rural housing needs. The bill invests more than $900 million for rural broadband expansion, including $800 million for the Reconnect program. Since 2019, more than 200,000 rural households have gained access to broadband through these programs. The bill also provides over $2.9 billion for farm and conservation programs. This includes $60 million to resolve ownership and succession of farmland issues, also known as the heirs property issue, which predominantly affects black farmers and has led to the loss of millions and millions of acres of privately held farmland. The bill provides $3.3 billion for agricultural research, which is the reason that American agriculture produces the highest quality, the safest, the most abundant, and the most economical food and fiber anywhere in the industrialized world. The bill continues our steadfast commitment to our country's long tradition of humanitarian assistance by including $1.74 billion for the Food for Peace grants and $245 million for the McGovern-Dole program. The bill fully funds SNAP, child nutrition, and WIC programs to meet the expected participation in FY22. For the first time ever, the bill provides additional protections for SNAP recipients by providing a such sums appropriation for the fourth quarter of FY22 to ensure that SNAP does not and will not run out of money. In this bill, we provide $3.45 billion to the Food and Drug Administration. Within this total, there is an increase of $72 million to address the opioid crisis, rare cancers, and resume unannounced in-person inspections in the two largest foreign drug manufacturing countries from whom we import pharmaceuticals. It also includes a $65 million increase to avoid or more quickly respond to food outbreaks and address heavy metals in baby food. Finally, the community project funding. I really enjoyed reading through the requests and learning quite a bit about what is important back home for so many of our members. The bill provides funding for 111 projects, totaling about $203 million in both Democratic and Republican districts. This is a good bill, and I ask for your support. I want to thank my personal staff, Michael Reed, Tanisha Boomer, and Danny Giddings, and the subcommittee staff, Martha Foley, Demlin Jones, Perry Yates, Joe Lehman, Justin Masucci, Randy Staples, Echo Dominicus, and Will Ostertag for their hard work in getting us to this point on the bill. I'd also like to thank the minority staff, the staff director, Tom O'Brien, and all of the minority staff for their collaboration and cooperation in producing what I believe is an outstanding work product. With that, I now recognize Mr. Fortenberry, who has been a phenomenal partner, thoughtful and collaborative in this endeavor. Mr. Fortenberry, you are now recognized for any opening remarks that you would like to make.
Thank you so much for yielding, Mr. Chairman. I'm also very grateful for your friendship. And let me start by saying this. Agriculture has a unique ability to unite people across political, social, and economic divides. And I believe that unity is reflected before us today. Mr. Chairman, you have shown amazing equanimity, working in fairness with our members and yours. We owe you and your staff an enormous amount of gratitude in getting us to a place where we could meet multiple member requests and have a good base bill to work from. Thank you so much. Mr. Chairman, production agriculture, it remains the mainstay of places like the Cornhusker State where I live. Production agriculture is also the mainstay of America's ag economy. Our extraordinary natural resources, ingenuity, technological prowess allow our nation's large-scale ag producers to provide the most abundant, low-cost, nutritious, and diverse array of foods in the world. In fact, as you mentioned, Mr. Chairman, our farmers and ranchers are so productive that we are empowered to meet our charitable instinct by moving approximately $2 billion overseas to persons who have food insecurity. I think that's very notable. Investments in this bill build upon this amazing productivity. Mr. Chairman, as you know, last year the Ag Secretary Sonny Perdue came to my district to learn how we in Nebraska are pioneering what I call the farm of the future. The goal is to enhance efficiency, regenerative capacity, new forms of small-scale niche agriculture that marry high-tech with high-touch, connecting the farmer to the family, the rural to the urban, and the farm to the table. The farm of the future is nimble and innovative, yet intimate, allowing persons to know and appreciate the origin of their food. I want to thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the increased investment in this bill for these promising concepts, including the management of farm data by farmers themselves. And I would like to invite the entire subcommittee to my district to see this ingenuity firsthand. Mr. Chairman, as we all are aware, in our day there is an appropriate and growing sensitization to environmental health. Farmers and ranchers have a long history of valuing stewardship, conservation, and sustainability of natural resources. I am grateful for including a number of my requests that emphasize the needs to invest in more sustainable and regenerative agriculture through better cover crop practices and control of fertilizer runoff, while also minimizing inputs. These essential practices can be made more effective through new state partnerships with the Agricultural Research Service, one right in Nebraska, to shape farm practices that increase production at lower costs, putting more money in farmers' pockets. Now, I'm not quite sure we can afford the $350 million increase in the emerging science on climate, but I do endorse investments in a new architectural program, or paradigm, I should say, for the 21st century, in which the ag economy makes smart, market-based decisions for enhanced profitability that result in a healthy, clean environment. That's the fullness of sustainability, an essential part of the ecosystem of livability. Finally, Mr. Chairman, I believe we now have an opportunity to expand and broaden the definition of the traditional ag family. Expanding our ag family with innovative opportunities that add value to our commodity groups, augment specialty crops, and reconnect the farmer to the family will expand local economies and tap into important growing trends about knowing your food. We can also expand and strengthen partnerships and cooperation between minority-serving institutions within our land-grant system. And I want to thank you, Mr. Chairman, for supporting my request at funding a youth ag program called Ag Discovery, which uses the valuable resources of our minority-serving institutions. Of note as well, as you have pointed out, there is a substantial increase in broadband for our rural communities, and something very important here, an enhancement of drug safety with additional resources for unannounced drug inspections in China and India. Mr. Chairman, of course, my preference is to highlight all the positive decisions in the legislation. I'm also obliged to address several areas of concern. As Ranking Member Granger has pointed out on several occasions, the increases in the bill proposed for non-defense bills like this one are too high. I would also like to point out that the bill contains a nutrition program provision that grants unlimited funding in the final quarter of this year. This is an issue that we believe we should leave up to the authorizing committee. With those things said, Mr. Chairman, I look forward to working with you, solve problems, think creatively, and get us hopefully to the point where we can pass a good bill into law. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Fortenberry. And at this time, I'm delighted to yield such time as she may utilize to the chair of the full committee, the gentlelady from Connecticut, Ms. DeLauro.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and to you and to Ranking Member Fortenberry. I just want to say a thank you for the bipartisan work on this bill, and for both of you, your ongoing commitment to American agriculture and to our rural communities. I might add, in your opening statement, Mr. Chairman, you talked about your friendship with the ranking member, and it's the hard work and dedication, but I believe at the core of the success of this bill is that a friendship that the two of you have forged together. So, and indeed, it is a good bill. And I also want to say a thank you to Ranking Member Granger, who I know also shares that commitment. Having chaired this Agriculture Subcommittee in the past, I know firsthand the important programs and the agencies this bill funds across the U.S. Department of Agriculture and the Food and Drug Administration. We have provided an increase of more than $2.8 billion for this year's bill, reflecting a total commitment of $26.55 billion in discretionary funding and resources for American families, our farmers and ranchers, and our rural communities within this bill. The COVID-19 pandemic created the greatest public health and economic crisis in a generation, and agriculture and the food system were not spared. Early on, we quite literally watched consolidated food supply chains break down right before our eyes. We saw on TV crops being plowed under. We saw that milk was being dumped. And as we build back, we must prioritize resiliency, not just for our farmers, but for American families and children who rely upon a safe, abundant, and accessible supply of food. I am proud of the bill's strong measures to combat hunger and nutrition insecurity. We meet the President's request and provide $6 billion in funding for the Special Supplemental Nutrition Program for SNAP and for the Women, Infants, and Children Program, WIC, which will extend the program's increases in fruit and vegetable benefits through September 2022. This is an investment in a healthier generation and will help us fight chronic, diet-related issues like obesity and diabetes. This bill provides funding to safeguard the SNAP program as well as the child nutrition programs like school meals, which were recently shown to be the healthiest source of food consumed in the country. We also meet our moral obligation to fight hunger internationally by providing $1.74 billion for Food for Peace grants and $245 million from McGovern-Dole. We also provide more than $1 billion in USDA's Food Safety and Inspection Service to keep the agency's frontline inspectors in plants, ensuring the safety of meat and poultry. And while speaking of meat and poultry, I want to highlight the USDA's newly announced Meat and Poultry Inspection Readiness Grant Program, more than $55 million to expand opportunities for small and mid-sized processors. Consolidation by corporate meat packers has been rampant and unchecked, and it is a danger to both farmers and consumers. More action is needed to address this anti-competitive behavior in agriculture, but USDA has taken an important first step. This bill also provides $347.4 million across USDA to confront the climate crisis and position American agriculture and our farmers as a key part of the climate solution. This funding will help advance regenerative agricultural practices that capture carbon by building soil organic matter. And for the first time, we have included dedicated funding for alternative proteins research within the Agricultural Research Service. The United States can continue to be a global leader on alternative protein science, and these technologies can play an important role in combating climate change and adding resiliency to our food system. Finally, this bill increases the budget of the Food and Drug Administration by $256 million and prioritizes FDA's important work to maintain food safety. Part of this increase targets the agency's work to prevent and quickly respond to foodborne illness outbreaks, and it also supports a new FDA initiative to reduce heavy metals that have been identified in baby foods. Again, let me say thank you to the chair and to the ranking member, and I urge my colleagues to support this bill. And let me just say a thank you to the staff that makes all of this possible. Thank you very much, and I yield back.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And at this time, I'd like to yield to the distinguished ranking member of the full committee, the gentlelady from Texas, for whatever opening remarks she may care to make.
Thank you, Chairman Bishop. Thank you for presenting the fiscal year 2022 Agriculture, Rural Development, Food and Drug Administration and related agencies appropriation bill. I also want to recognize the ranking member of the subcommittee, Mr. Fortenberry. I know both of you have worked together to fund priorities of members on both sides of the aisle. While this bill funds many important programs, it's based on a funding framework that does not have bipartisan support. To put it simply, the increases proposed for non-defense bills like this one are just too high. At the same time, the funding for our nation's defense is too low to meet the security challenges we face worldwide. If we want to fund the good things contained in this bill, we must work together to develop spending levels both sides can support. We also need to agree to leave out controversial provisions. I have a few examples that I hope will be carefully reviewed as this particular bill moves through the process. The bill essentially grants the administration unlimited spending authority for a nutrition program that was already dramatically expanded during the pandemic. At a time when our nation's spending is at an all-time high, we should be finding ways to rein in spending rather than write a blank check. In addition, if there's one thing we know from the events of the last year, it's that we are too reliant on imported medical products. The FDA must help to create a regulatory environment where manufacturers of medical equipment and pharmaceuticals come back to the United States. Some of the statistics are truly alarming. For example, 74% of the plants that manufacture drug ingredients are overseas. And 54% of the plants that manufacture finished drugs are also overseas. Nearly 20% of those facilities have not been inspected at all, not at all in the last 5 years. This is an unacceptable national security and public health risk. While I'm encouraged that the bill includes funds for unannounced inspections of drug manufacturing plants around the world, more must be done. In closing, it's our responsibility on the committee to develop appropriate bills with the bipartisan support that can get signed into law. We can't allow an important bill, a very important bill like this one, that supports our farmers and our ranchers, expands internet coverage into rural areas, and ensures that our drugs are safe and effective to be delayed. Our disagreements can be easily resolved if we commit to addressing them now, but time is of the essence. The end of the fiscal year will be here in less than 100 days. Mr. Chairman, I look forward to continuing to work with you and Chair DeLauro to address these concerns as the process moves forward. Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Granger. Are there any other members who wish to be recognized? Hearing none. I'm sorry, Ms. McCollum, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I thought I would save time in full committee and just make a few remarks here in subcommittee. I want to thank you and the ranking member for the work that you did. I also want to state that a strong defense starts out with our military service men and women knowing that their families have access to food and shelter. I'd like to thank you for the work that you're doing in conjunction with what I'm doing in the defense bill to work to make sure that military families are not food insecure. We've all seen the reports in the paper. There's work to be done in my bill, but Mr. Chair, I want to thank you and the ranking member for the work that you've done in this bill to start this discussion from happening. I'd like to thank you for what you did in support of tribal colleges for extension services so that they can work on the first foods of their the First Nations, the land that this Capitol was built on. And also the work that you have done to make sure that SNAP and the food nutrition services work together for the tribal nations. And broadband, not only for rural parts of our country, but also for tribal colleges. But foremost, I'd like to thank you for the work that you're supporting that several committee members are engaged in understanding better and making sure that consumers are protected. Ms. Ming and Mr. Fortenberry and I have sent a letter, but we've also been working with the FDA and the Office of Minority Health to do better outreach on skin lightening products that we know cause skin damage as well as damage to major organs. So we look to working forward with the committee, and I thank you and the staff, and as well as I said, the ranking member for the work on these issues. With that, I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. McCollum. Is there any other member who would like to be recognized at this time? Mr. Pocaine.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to thank you and our ranking member Fortenberry and the hardworking subcommittee staff on this excellent bill. I especially want to thank you for including resources for the plant germplasm research facility at UW-Madison. It's a critical step to replacing a World War II era building that critical research is done by the USDA and UW-Madison researchers. And I was also very pleased to see funding for the rural city of Reedsburg, Wisconsin, to turn a decommissioned elementary school into a community center. Overall, this bill makes critical changes and investments in broadband, tackling hunger, combating climate change, and of course, helping Wisconsin farmers and farmers across the country. So I just look forward to supporting this bill, and I also want to thank, of course, our chair and our ranking member of the full committee as well for all your hard work. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pocaine. Is there any other member who would like to be heard? Hearing none, let me ask if any member has an amendment that they would like to offer. If not, I'd like to recognize Ms. Pingree, the gentlelady from Maine, for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I move to report the bill favorably to the full committee.
The question is on the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the motion is agreed to. I'd like to ask unanimous consent that the staff be permitted to make technical and conforming changes to the measure that was just approved. And as a reminder to members, please leave all copies of the bill and the report in the room. Without objection, the meeting is now adjourned.